Sean Porter, cinematographer of 20th Century Women. I like this movie because it's about an era when I grew up, the late 70s, and it takes a slice of life, of American life, that we don't really see in films, because it's a quiet slice of a feminist who believes she was part of the revolution and now has to live this creed at home with a fatherless boy, right? Set it up, yeah.
Right.
Annette Bening, we're talking.
Yeah, Annette Bening. Yeah, just amazing actress. I think, yeah, it's a time of change, that switch between the 70s and the 80s, and I mean, it was a unique experience for me because I was born on the heels of that, and so I wasn't really privy or part of that experience, and it was a really unique experience working with Mike, because this is his coming of age story, and I didn't have traditional insider information on how that went down or how it felt to be there.
Mike Mills, who directed Beginners, which was really the story of his father coming out. Remember, it was the Christopher Plummer Oscar-winning role. Is the Mike Mills that you're talking about here?
Right.
And now
this is the other. This is arguably the story that happens before that movie.
Right. Okay.
And it's a story about his
mother.
Yeah,
and a little more fictionalized, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. But it's also great because it's a coming of age for everybody in the story at various points in their life. So you have her, arguably toward the end, and then her son who's just getting going, and they're both like having to deal with all this immense cultural change that's happening in the world. And then you have this great, beautiful house that kind of is an illustration of the whole thing, and it's has so much potential, but yet it's kind of falling apart around them.
The boy is just soon after puberty, and Annette Bening, as his overly protective mother, decides that she shouldn't hover over the boy during this crucial age when he really needs parenting. She asks two young women to help.
Right.
And he is really baffled by this. Like, I don't need any help. What are all you chicks doing? But he's loving it too, isn't he?
Oh, yeah.
In a way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that there's the world's there's so much. It's all new. Everything's new at that point in your life, and you think you kind of know it all. And it's also the beginning of punk, and he has his small circle of friends, and he has his influences, and yet those girls, Greta Gerwig's character from, she's this photographer from New York, and then Elle Fanning plays this character, Julie, and they both kind of blow his world up and challenge all of his preconceived notions about how things should be or what happiness ought to be and what relationships should look like. And so, yeah, I think it's a wild ride for him.
It becomes largely a movie about as much about him as it is about this 20th century woman, the lead one, Annette Bening.
Yeah.
But as a cinematographer, you really were devoted to a realistic portrayal of this woman at her years. We see every single wrinkle.
Which, I hope is a good thing.
It's great, but
yeah,
we're not used to seeing that in films where our great screen divas are usually
No, it's true. Up. It's true, and it could be very easily the last movie I ever photographed. But I feel like Mike and I had really candid conversations early on about how the movie was going to go.
And it had to go.
And it had to go,
yes,
and exactly, because he has a certain way he wants to work, and I think we both knew that if I was like, okay, Mike, every time we move the camera, there's going to be a 35 to 40 minute lighting setup, his movie that he wanted wouldn't have been made, and I wouldn't say that was a compromise visually. I think it was more just an aesthetic decision to say, like, she is a real amazing person, both in the script and in real life, and we're going to celebrate that rather than trying to turn it into something it's not. And I remember us, talking about how we might handle some of those photographic challenges, and one day during prep, Mike called or texted her or something, and he's like, Annette Bening was just sitting in my office, and there's just like this big window behind and to the side of her, and she wasn't wearing any makeup, and you know what, we're going to be just fine. And like, I think at that moment he just realized, like, there's such an innate inner beauty that she has, and she glows no matter what her circumstances are. So we didn't have to, like, I mean, we tried in different ways to raise the visual bar, but it wasn't about this typical Hollywood diva lighting.
Right, you couldn't do that. This is a woman, a survivor of social change, who's gotten through a man's world on her own with her family, and she is a hard-scrabble woman who we have to see those hard edges, and we do. Annette Bening, tell us what she was like to work with.
Oh, just a dream.
Poor dear has lost 4 Oscars, So those of us who count this think, can this really be her year? That's certainly a great performance.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she was a dream, and I think that she was in on just about everything, and but it's a very exciting feeling to walk onto set and know you're going to be photographing Annette Bening, because you know no matter what happens, it's going to be really interesting and great, and just a joy to watch. And that was important for Mike, to create an environment where that was not only available but promoted. Like, he wanted a space where the actors could really engage with themselves and with each other, and push things and try things. And again, that's sometimes you could look at that as a conflict of interest with my work or with the work of a DP, but that's the great challenge. It's like, okay, how do I act in service of this story and of the way Mike and Annette want to work, and rather than hinder it by saying, oh, I have to do it a certain way to make it look a certain way, and it actually ends up hurting the movie. But no, she was incredible, and I felt like every take she was just giving Mike so much to work with, and you just see the history there, and like between her and Warren, like so much filmmaking history. So anytime she was on set, it was just just.
Is she always that chipper? I once saw Joan Rivers on the red carpet, one of these award shows, interview Warren Beatty, and she said, "Why Annette? Why her? You're the hottest guy in Hollywood. How did she get you?" And his answer was fascinating. He said, Joan, he says, look at that woman. She's always happy. She's always smiling. She's bursting with joy all the time. I have to have that in my life. And the minute he said it and you look down, she didn't see him say this, and you look down the camera, it was a great way the scene was caught. And you could see that glow that she has. And is that off camera too?
I think that's pretty real, yeah. I mean, obviously there was challenging moments and challenging days, but in general, and she's been doing it for so long, and she enjoys the process. And I think there's some actors out there who, I don't know, they're doing it for different reasons. She knew everyone's name. She said hi to me every day. She said goodbye to me every day. Like, she just liked the process of making films, and I think making films the way Mike was making films, and I think really spoke to her. And so I think, yeah, in that sense, we gave her an opportunity to just, do what she did best.
God is in the details, as they say, and this movie is scream. If you love old throwback nostalgic winks, it's full of puffy hair, and lots of cigarettes get smoked. And as an ex-smoker, I was dying watching this thing. I love the fact that she's reading Watership Down. I read that, and that was the #1 bestseller of its day. And this whole movie is peppered with these things, right? And you, as cinematographer, have to dip in and out of them with a wink, I guess. What was your approach?
Right, because you don't want to, nothing's too heavy-handed, yet at the same time, like the way Mike's films really are created around, they're socially constructed, so there's so much more than just what's happening in the room. It's what's happening globally or culturally in that moment, so impactful, and that's why you have these montage moments where he might just cut to like a book against gray or a particular object against gray, just to kind of underscore it's not just this moment, it's everything that's happening around this moment. And at the same time, you didn't want to go overboard, and you mentioned nostalgia, and Mike and I talked about that early on, that we didn't want to, and I brought this up to him, I didn't want it to feel nostalgic. I wanted to feel present. You can't help it, because in a certain way, the production design, the cars, the costuming, the makeup, all that's going to do the work. It's going to say this is where we are in time and place. And so to go really overhanded and use a bunch of diffusion and make everything gold, felt like it was actually going to create a barrier between the audience and the film. And I thought it was really important that it felt extremely current, because I think those issues are. And it's interesting what James was saying, in terms of like, it's, every good films, I think, resonate with audiences of today, not just audiences from, who went through that. And so granted, people who did go through the 70s in Southern California or anywhere in the country will have a special resonance with that movie. J. Lucas Zimmerman, who, the young boy who plays Jamie, he's half my age, and he's having his own experience with that film, and I want him and I want his friends to also have an engaging experience watching it. And so if you turn that dial too far and you're saying, okay, sit back, you're watching a period film, and none of this applies to you, all of a sudden you've kind of like let an audience off the hook a little bit. And I think I wanted it to be very present, and I wanted you to be able to get caught up in it.
How conscious were you of gender, that you were actually catching a female point of view, or is that even a factor, because this is both his perspective and hers in terms of empathetic centers characters.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I think that I think it was actually fairly evenly balanced because granted, it's the story about these three women, but it's very much Jamie the character's world, and it's kind of in a lot of ways it's him watching and what he sees, and so we're kind of being guided through his experience, and the women in his life are draped over that experience. No, I think if and that's a good thing to consider. Obviously, if you're going to move into shooting a film like this, it's really pretty ensemble, and so you can't get too like, okay, we're only shooting it from one person's perspective, because then you're going to lose all these other perspectives. So you have to, yeah. And I liked, the way Mike wrote the script. It allowed us to check in with each of them at different points in their life and see things that the other characters weren't privy to. So as the audience member, that gives you a little extra. That's kind of exciting to see.